Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin the funeral service of Charlotte Newberger. Rabbi David Wolkenfeld and Rabbi Asher Lopatin will be officiating. We welcome those of you who are joining us online. Just as a last and gentle reminder, please be sure that your phones have been turned off. The Kriya ceremony was held earlier this morning.
Good afternoon. We all have the solemn and sad responsibility of saying farewell to Charlotte Newberger today and showing our love for her and our support to her family. And we'll hear words from people who knew her and loved her for many, many years this afternoon. I'm going to open by reciting Psalm 23. It's a psalm that describes perhaps the passage of the soul on its way to tranquility. It's also a psalm that describes some comfort we can take in sad times and hard times that we ourselves have to walk through when we experience grief and mourning. I'll recite it in Hebrew, and then we can recite it as well in English. Mizmor LaDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echzar, bino desha yarbitzeni, amei menuchot inahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech b'geit salmavet lo irara, ki ata imadi. Shiftecha mishantecha hema yinachamuni, ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorarai, dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya, achtov v'chesed yurdafuni kol yomei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai li'orech yamim. If you'd like to follow along in English, it's on the inside of your service folders. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I'd like to ask Carolyn Shuham, a very close friend of many years of Charlotte's, to share some reflections at this moment.
So how do you talk about someone like Charlotte? I mean, in so many ways she was bigger than life, and this still doesn't seem real. And I was thinking that in a perfect world, everyone would have a friend like Charlotte. Someone who listens without judgment, cares without limits, supports you unconditionally, and accepts you just the way you are. I was so lucky, as many of you in here have been, to have had her for a friend. Charlotte and I met about 55 years ago with our toddlers in tow at the Aldine playground. And we've been playing together ever since for some 55 years. She's the only person in my life who always said yes to everything. Everything I proposed. Let's be together every New Year's Eve for the next 50 years. Yes. Let's go to London every year and see 10 plays in 10 days. Yes. Let's do children's theater. That would be fun. Yes. Well, you get the idea. She embraced life and lived it so fully. She could be a little dangerous to travel with, though, because Charlotte, we could be standing in line somewhere, and all of a sudden, she would start talking to a perfect stranger who'd end up having dinner with us, and then ended up being invited to her house in Chicago. She was amazing. As you all know, she was also an incredible wife, mother, grandmother, an incredible philanthropist, a successful businesswoman, And I could go on and on. And yet, with all her accomplishments, she seemed to do it so effortlessly. You know, she'd work all day, then have 3 meetings for our charity, and then have 20 for dinner. I was in awe of her. And in spite of all of her amazing success at every single thing she ever tried, she was always so humble and so, I mean, you would never hear from her anything about what she had accomplished. I remember getting really mad at her because I called her one day and said, I heard you got this big honor and there was a big dinner for you. Why didn't you tell me? I would have flown in. Oh, she said, I didn't want to bother you. But we all know that life is not so simple. She had her losses and her struggles and challenges like we all do. But she never complained. She faced it all with courage and grace and humor. She was truly our warrior princess. She was also a brilliant student of life. She never stopped learning or growing, taking courses. And she's the person I always sought to be like. I wanted to emulate her because she had more success at living than anyone I've ever known. And I am so, so grateful that I got to share most of my life with her. I'm going to miss her so much, but Rumi wrote, "Goodbyes are only for those who love with their eyes, because for those who love with their heart and soul, there is no separation." And I'm working very hard on that. Thank you.
Tamar Newberger, please come. Robin, you come stand.
A few years ago, my mother turned to me, and uncharacteristically for her, she talked about this day with the remark, "Okay, I'm only going to say this once. People do not like long funerals, so make mine short." Isn't that so like her, worrying about others and what is best for them at her own funeral? And isn't it so like us to only kind of follow her instructions? So I'm looking at this room. There are so many people here from all of her varied, fascinating arenas that my mother touched and impacted. Jews and those with high Judexes who fake it well, business people, arts people, civic activists, politicos, her dear friends, my dear friends who she took on as family, our actual family, and I know for certain that she would be surprised. She never talked about herself, her many accomplishments, or the people whose lives she changed, and Carolyn said that as well. So, and we didn't coordinate. On occasions when we would find out some crazy cool thing that she ideated, built, supported, alley-ooped, or was awarded, sometimes weeks, often years later, or if we just comment on how people found her to be the kindest person they'd ever met, she would dismiss our praise and admiration as unwarranted and silly. I think I learned from my friend Kim about her Best Realtor on the Planet award. My mother would never have told us. And only yesterday did Rabbi Lopatin flag that the Illinois legislature had actually honored her many achievements with an official resolution. No. It indeed would be the world's shortest eulogy if all I knew about my mother had been told to me by my mother herself. But maybe that was her clever master plan for the day. So my job up here is to tell her story. Charlotte was born in Milwaukee. Her father, an American-born Jew, was a dairy cattle jobber, and her mother, also an American-born Jew, we are practically Mayflower in Jewish chronology, a loving housewife. My grandfather would spend the week up in Wisconsin, cattle wrangle territory, and my mother said that when he came home on weekends to get his work clothes cleaned, the car would smell entirely like manure. She described herself as a scrawny girl without many friends, which is, of course, hard to believe, but does demonstrate that personal transformation is possible. After public schools in Milwaukee, Mom went to Madison, where she graduated with a theater degree. She starred in the school's production of Gigi. Legend has it that Hollywood came calling, but my grandfather would not allow it, fearing the casting couch. Clearly a man ahead of his time. She briefly worked at the Boston store behind the counter, but soon moved to the big city of Chicago with a few friends, lived in a little apartment where the roommates all shared clothes and even the wedding dress, and started to work as a grade school teacher. She met my father while he was in law school at University of Chicago. She was dating somebody else, a guy named Pudge. My father met her one day when Pudge brought her into the Commons to meet his friends. He thought she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. As Mom told it years later, she remembered Dad from that encounter too, as he was being very funny and clever. But that was not the start of their romantic relationship. A few years later, after law school graduation, they were reintroduced by mutual friends. My dad remembers being very excited when asked if he wanted to go out with Charlotte for a double date where they played miniature golf and had dinner. My father kept kosher. My mother ordered Canadian bacon. Though wanting to, Dad did not kiss her goodnight. But he was smitten and remained so for 60 years. He brought her fresh flowers every Friday for the entire length of their marriage. They had similar interests. My father told us this weekend that even now, after all this time, he would be in the house and walk into a room where Mom was and feel overwhelmed by the love he has for her. This Friday would have been their 60th anniversary. She lit up every room that she was in. After a courtship periodically interrupted by the bar exam and the Army, my parents married and had 2 amazing children. My mother was working in community theater and active in worthy political, artistic, and civic causes. But as Robin and I grew older, she wanted to make money on her own. She always loved real estate, the aesthetics of a home, and anybody who's ever been to my parents' apartment has seen her impeccable taste on display. The insight about what makes a particular home a great fit for an individual client, and the people-to-people interaction of the sales process. She was such a compelling, effervescent personality. So typical of her, she went all in, getting a broker's license and getting to work. Because of her natural warmth, every client became a dear friend. After a few years in the business, she and 5 other women who were successful brokers in a large, fancy firm here decided that they could do even better in a firm with a different culture, one focused on personal ethics and cooperation, not competition. In a bold, and I remember my grandmother worried that it was not bold but rash, move, they left the firm and formed the groundbreaking Beliard Gordon and Partners, the first all-female real estate brokerage in the city. That happened in 1980, which I know because I remember the telephone number being 943-1980. Note that, kids, we used to know phone numbers. The firm was wildly successful and kept expanding. Ultimately, the firm was so valuable that they sold it to a blue-chip competitor. One of the main reasons for its success was that my mother knew how to hire. It is one of the few talents that, in her modesty, she was willing to acknowledge that she had. So many people have told me over the last several days how she invested in them, mentored them, and made them or their organizations what they are today, that they wouldn't be here without her help. She really understood people and wanted to help them reach their potential. The other key to her success was her incredible kindness. She was famously nice. Though obviously busy with her career, neither Robin nor I, nor the city, state, country, or world got short shrift. Well, that's not entirely true. When she would make us a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, she would plop the peanut butter and jelly on top of one another in the center of the bread, and then use the other piece of bread to smush it down, hoping the mound would spread out sufficiently to the edges. It never worked. But that was one of the rare moments of parental fail. Never has there been a more loving, supportive, or attentive mother. Robin will cover that momentarily. I won't list all of Mom's contributions to the civic and cultural life of Jewish and secular Chicago. It would take too long, and I think she would find it unseemly. But here are a few. She was a founding member of the St. Nicholas Theater, whose core group became the Steppenwolf Theater, on whose board she also served, shepherding it to become one of the country's most revered theaters. I remember when the St. Nicholas crew, like William H. Macy and David Mann, would gather together in our living room for readings, and I would peek down from the top of the stairs in my pajamas and robe, wide-eyed with interest, and she loved that I would listen. She was on the boards of the Auditorium Theater Council and the National Jewish Theater, but also supported smaller companies, helping them realize their vision of using arts for the greater good. She endowed a poetry prize at Lilith, the Jewish feminist magazine. She used her platform as a Jewish leader to make change. She was in the founding cohort of the Jewish Women's Foundation, convening the power and treasure of Chicago's Jewish community in support of programs and advocacy that directly affect women, such as fighting for the right of agunot, those are women who are not granted a Jewish divorce by their husbands, and sexual harassment prevention. She chaired the board of the National Foundation for Jewish Culture, a huge job that supported Jewish academic scholarship and cultural preservation. She was chair of the American Jewish Congress in the Midwest, which bestowed upon her their first Deborah Award as one of the most influential women leaders in the Jewish community. She was on the Federation Board, headed the board of Community Foundation for Jewish Education, and served on the board of Hillels of Illinois, just to name a few. I think you can understand why the peanut butter and jelly had to be smushed. She was endlessly entrepreneurial and never daunted nor intimidated about starting something new. One night, we all sat down for dinner, and she announced, "I went down to Gilman, Illinois today to see a property thinking it could be a country house, and decided instead that it would be a perfect for a health retreat for Chicagoans. Let's do that." I mean, like, what, right? But thus was born the Heartland Spa. Later, the Heartland added an in-residence writers retreat at my mother's instigation. She started a monthly salon in the old Parisian style, which in time was nicknamed Charlotte's Web, not her choice, where she brought friends together with invited influencers to share new ideas and plans for change-making. She took an active role in her local community, recently serving on the board of the Village in Lincoln Park, which helps older members of the community stay in their homes and live active, engaged lives. Again, so like her to help others who are not as fortunate as she. She even helped support this funeral home when the funerary industrial complex overtook Chicago and there were no independent ones left. Someone told me that when it came to my mother, whatever anyone needed, the answer was always yes. She would make it happen and do it with a smile. As you have heard, she wore many hats. Yes, those hats too. She had such panache and such elegance. You would be right to wonder what happened to that gene, but I detect it in the grandchildren. My mother was endlessly giving and endlessly loving. She would befriend someone at a neighboring table in a restaurant, and next thing you know, they would come to dinner. She helped the garage attendant in her building further his education. Wherever I went, a fancy fundraiser or the local cleaners, I was known as Charlotte's daughter, a moniker I will eternally hold dear. To know our mother was to know one of the most extraordinary people on earth. But what we knew was the most loving wife to an amazing husband, the mother of the year, every year, and the most attentive and dedicated grandmother. We have been so blessed to be hers. She was the person I would turn to whenever I needed advice and guidance. She never judged, aside from scratching her head at the inexcusable pile of unopened moving boxes from Prague that Andy and I still have in our apartment. She listened and she affirmed. Recently, I was very stressed about something, so I went over to her house, laid down next to her in bed, held her hand, listened to what she had to say, and I fell asleep next to her. That was exactly what I needed at that moment, and only she could have given it to me. I will miss it so much. So everyone, to honor Charlotte and to keep her flame alive, welcome a stranger and take them to dinner. Turn your creative dreams into reality. and do not forget lipstick. Is this fresh water? Forgot my glasses. It's going to be interesting. Okay. I don't know. Is that going to work? No. Okay. Apparently, when I was a toddler, I used to cry in my crib for hours every night. My mother could not make out what I was saying, but I'm sure "I want my mommy" was somewhere in there. Anyway, my mother told me that it drove her crazy, and it became a joke that she ended up taking the medicine that the doctor had prescribed to make me sleep. But that story comes to mind now because, once again, I am crying every night before I go to bed. These seem to be the bookends of my life with my mom. As we just heard so beautifully from my sister, there were many facets to my mom's life. But the part of her life that I can speak to best is what she was as a mother. And to this point, I actually want to direct my remarks to her grandchildren, Andrew, Samantha, Galia, and Alex. Because what I want to talk about are some of the examples that she set for me and my sister. And maybe if you are parents one day, these are lessons that your children will be grateful that you absorbed. First of all, she never pretended that she was perfect or that we had to try to be perfect. She regularly lost her glasses, she broke dishes, she lost her wallet, she let her nephew fall out of the car. Was it her niece? And even when it came to all of her commitments outside of her home, from the time we were very young, she would tell us, point blank, that she knew that she was not the best at this or at that. But she would also tell us that she was determined to do the most good with all of the talents that she had. Being the greatest or the mostest at whatever was not the credential that someone needed to get things done. My mother taught us feminism in a very straightforward sense. Her life was busy and full. She raised a family, she worked, she sat on numerous boards, as you just heard. She told us about her mother, who did not work outside the home, but how important it was that our Nana had accrued a stash of money for whenever she might need it. My mom always asked for it and validated our opinions. Even when I was like 7 years old, my mom wanted to know how I felt about her taking a Shakespeare class at the local university because she'd be out of the house a bit more. She was supremely practical. She reminded us that our passions did not have to become our careers. She found great pride in giving the money she earned to the causes she believed in. And she understood that this, along with volunteering, marching, joining, and of course voting, was an essential part of what's needed to build institutions or to make change. She and my father modeled what it means to be part of a community. She thrived on bringing people together in their home. She entertained guests all of the time, for Shabbat meals, for parties, for fundraisers, for salons. Everyone was welcome. There could never be too many guests or too much work to prepare a meal for 20 or 30 people. She knew the uplifting power of surrounding oneself with beauty. She put a mini bouquet of flowers in our rooms whenever we came home for a visit. She made me a fancy wedding despite my most ungrateful and hollow protests against materialism. And she let me win the fight not to get into the limousine, as I made her fetch her car and search for parking while we went from the ceremony to the party. She did not believe in guilt. She called us when she wanted to talk to us. She wished us the best when we did something fun that didn't include her. As we got older, she did not lead her life through us. When I was in my 30s and 40s, I used to say that she got more done in a morning than I did in an entire week. She only wanted the best for us. Anything she owned, anything she wore, anything we needed, she offered it. If she joined a worthy organization, she made a place for us at the table. If she met someone interesting, she set up a meeting for us to meet them as well. If she took an exercise class that was good, she encouraged us to sign up. But she never tried to make a decision for us. She did nearly mandate that we get a manicure before we make a presentation at work. But other than that, she let us be ourselves. She came to rely on us being ourselves. Probably the overriding thing that my mom modeled for us, something that never dimmed as she got older, was kindness. Yes, she loved all of her friends. From the start, she treated her sons-in-law as her own, and she embraced her machatanim and their extended families. But it would not be an exaggeration to say that I never heard her utter a bad word about anyone she knew, at least not in front of me and Tamar. I used to try to tease a reaction out of her, at least say something in Yiddish. But really, she never said anything critical. In fact, the opposite was true. If she ever felt someone did not already like her, she would make the biggest effort to win that person over. She showed how easy it is to treat people well. My mother was courageous but humble. She knew how to command attention but put everyone around her at ease. Even as we aged, she was still our main source of comfort. She believed in herself, and she let us know in hundreds or thousands of ineffable ways that she believed in her children. I don't think we understand yet what we are going to miss.
Okay, Andy Shapiro and Steve Sachs, please come and share reflections as sons-in-law.
I believe I'm designated to speak on behalf of both of us here, and we will honor Charlotte's wishes. Okay. If you were to ask Steve, he would confidently assure you that he was Charlotte's favorite son-in-law. But here's the thing. If you asked me, I would confidently assure you that I was. That's because she had that knack of making everyone feel like he or she was the most important and best person she had ever met. And this was especially great for the two of us because we could do no wrong in her eyes, which was at times a little bit frustrating for her daughters because on occasion we probably were wrong, but she always sided with us on everything. Now, the following two things can be true at the same time. Charlotte Newberger could believe that everything you touch would be perfect, but also she could also decide to rearrange all of the furniture in your home while you're out of town. This actually happened more than once. She usually got it right. But she always let us know, not just in our heads, but in our guts, that we were family, and we never, ever doubted that. Now, she did have opinions, which is great, because being the nicest person in the world, as you've heard from so many, and you'll hear again today, does not mean being bland in any way. And speaking for myself, we had conversations, mostly in the little kitchen at 3240, especially after my mom died, which I appreciated more than people will know. And she took care to invoke my family, who she had known, to my children, which I also appreciated very, very much. So I'll close with an observation that I am sure is true for Steve as well. And that is when Tamara and I moved back to Chicago in 2006, and then probably true for Steve when Steve and Robin moved back from Ecuador, I was trying to make my way in this city, and I would be in one setting or another, or whether it was professional or civic or at an event or a shul somewhere, and then I'd be meeting people, trying to connect. And all I would need to say is, I am Charlotte Newberger's son-in-law. And suddenly, oh, you're Charlotte's son-in-law. It placed me in the universe. It endowed me with some little halo. It was a calling card, universal. It was the key to the city. So that is who I was, and that is who I am. That is who we were. Maybe her favorites, maybe not, but Charlotte Newberger's sons-in-law, now and always.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple. You certainly don't want to get into a tit or tat here about who was the favorite son-in-law. But what I do want to say is, like, this has been a very difficult one to swallow, I think. And it's almost slightly embarrassing that I've been sort of crying more than anyone in the entire family. And I think one of the reasons, and something that I would want to consult with the rabbis at some point, is that the reason why I've been crying is because I felt like she loved me so much. And is that a sort of a narcissistic reason to mourn? But I'll ask you guys that later. But I also wanted to just mention, as Robin did, about the grandchildren. There was some example that Charlotte has set, and it wasn't just Charlotte. There were a couple other people in this room who come to mind, who were trailblazers of their generations, and it comes to mind my mom, who's blessedly still with us, Ruthie Kahn, who's here. I mean, these are women who broke barriers, and I think Charlotte was, and these women who I mentioned and others in this room, should be applauded and lauded, and an example for us all. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Charlotte's grandchildren, Andrew Sachs, Samantha Sachs, Galia Newberger, and Alex Shapiro. Please come. Oh, yeah, the poem first. Okay. Okay, Rebecca and Deborah Engel. I'm going to recite a poem. Thank you. That was my mistake. Mm-hmm. Wait till it's the...
Hi, we are the nieces of Aunt Charlotte, Rebecca Engel and Deborah Engel. Our mom was Renee Engel, Charlotte's sister. I carry your heart with me. I carry it in, by E.E. Cummings. Can you hear it? No, sorry. I also forgot my glasses. I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. I am never without it. Anywhere I go, you go, my darling. And whatever is done by only me is your doing, my dear. I fear no fate, for you are my fate, my sweet. I want no world, for beautiful you are my world, my true. And it is you are whatever a moon has always meant, and whatever a sun will always sing is you. Here is the deepest secret nobody knows. Here is the root of the root, and the bud of the bud, and the sky of a tree called life, which grows higher than soul can hope or mind can hide. This is the wonder that's keeping the stars apart. I carry your heart. I carry it in my heart.
The grandchildren, please come.
I could do no wrong in Grandma's eyes. No one had my back like her. When I was a little kid, at the countless dinner parties she hosted, which I'm sure many of you guys attended, it was almost a guarantee that I would spill my double serving of matzo ball soup on myself. Boyfriend didn't mean to, it's okay. She would say every time, even when my mom was angry that I ruined another shirt. I would look across the table and see the compassion in her eyes, and that would make everything feel all right. And I know the compassion she had for me, while stemming from a special spot of love in her heart, wasn't unique. She treated everyone that way. Grandma would always give everyone the benefit of the doubt. She saw the good in everyone and never thought about the bad. I've never met another person who can have so much kindness for every soul she encounters, and this has really shaped the way I want to live my life. Grandma also would remember the smallest details. I remember one time when I was 9 or 10, and I was staying over at their house, and we were ordering food, and I asked for an Izzy. And from that day on, without fail, whenever I would stay at their house, there would always be an Izzy waiting for me in the fridge. On our pre-Shabbat phone calls, which were the highlight of my week for the past year and a half, she would bring up friends from elementary school that even I had forgotten about. Things that seemed trivial to others were always so important to her. I was always in awe of her ability to make everyone feel comfortable and feel like they belonged. How does someone make a complete stranger feel like family? I think it was just the aura she gave off and her energy. And when she was around, you felt happy and loved. And I know that everyone she has ever encountered feels the same.
There are a lot of special things about being close to Grandma, and I'm sure that everyone here has stories about the incredible ways that my grandma has touched their lives. She truly was the most generous, thoughtful, and loyal person I've ever known. However, there is something uniquely special about being Grandma's granddaughter. Whenever I fuss over my mom's hair or make her change her outfit, my mom would always sigh, "You are just like Grandma." This so skipped a generation. And while there may be some genetic reason that Samantha and I were always drawn to Char's endless lipstick collections or coat collections from such a young age, I think it's really because we just wanted to hang out with our grandma. And Grandma loved having granddaughters. She took Samantha and me to high teas, where we would sit perched at fancy tables in our attempt at good manners and eat way too many tiny desserts. She would always put up with my often misguided choices at the nail salon, even when I wanted each nail a different color and Samantha chose a sensible light pink. Grandma's leadership as a woman, though, went far beyond manicures and shopping, although there was plenty of that. Our grandma was a deeply admired leader in her community, an entrepreneur, and a real pioneer for women in Chicago and beyond. This combination made it so that when I was little, and even more so now, I only wanted to be just like Grandma when I grew up. Grandma was the most voracious reader I've ever known, and which meant she not only had a constant supply of book recommendations, but also took the time to read books that mattered to me, too. When the four of us went off to college, she took great interest in what we were learning and what we were reading in class. At Passover Seders, she always kept special prizes for each of us, often a beautiful scarf or sweater for Samantha and me, to be given when we asked a good question. It's hard to put into words the impact that growing up with a role model like that has. Someone endlessly kind but focused on their goals, someone incredibly accomplished yet almost ridiculously humble. But I know that I am the way I am because I grew up with Charlotte Newberger as my grandma.
Grandma wore things that were very beautiful and very intricate. For me, the most distinct of this beautiful and intricate category were her hats. Grandma had so many hats, a hat for every single occasion. Synagogue hats and casual visors, hats for when she would go to London every year to see plays, Hats for when she would win real estate awards, hats for graduations, hats for bar mitzvahs, hats for anniversaries, hats attached to headbands, and hats attached to hair-colored lace that sat on her head at impossible inclines. She stored them all on hooks in the hallway to her bedroom, and growing up, Golly and I would assist her every year in the ritual of changing out the summer hats for the winter ones. My life has been marked by so many Charlotte-led rituals. Dinners, Shabbat and otherwise, at Grandma and Saba's were a ritual I particularly cherished and one that so many of you have gotten to take part in. These dinners involved elaborate place settings, cornucopia centerpieces on Thanksgiving, and most importantly, a perfect guest list of people that Grandma wanted to convene or meet one another. Grandma wrote name tags for each of us and would place these names thoughtfully around her big glass table, knowing that Alex would want to sit next to his older cousin Andrew, that the Israeli Consul General should be seated beside the professor of Middle Eastern Studies, or that the intern with political aspirations should be sat next to the mayor. As her granddaughter, I feel eternally lucky to have had such close contact with her habits and her nature, and I will spend my life trying to imitate her elegance, social ease, her generosity, and innate gift for bringing people together. I love her so much.
It's really nice to see everybody here. Since Friday, I've been looking at that empty seat on the couch, and I've been listening for Grandma's sweet voice. This is a sad speech. And I've been thinking about that soft, papery touch of her hands, and I've felt this pang in my chest that part of us is missing, and it's really hard. But mostly I feel really proud. It's the same pride I've experienced for years when someone new tells me, of course I know the Newbergers and I love your grandparents. It's the pride of recounting the warmth of Shabbat dinners or reminiscing about the song sessions after our Thanksgivings, these beautiful evenings that Grandma would curate without a fuss and execute perfectly. And it's the pride of revering my own mother and my aunt, these daughters that my grandmother raised. And it's the pride of seeing, it's the pride I see when I look into my grandfather's eyes when he talks about Charlotte. And it's the pride I felt when I'd call before Shabbat and hear my grandmother say, "My precious Andrew." And when I'd sit with Grandma and I'd tell her about my classes or my job or my friends, these opportunities in life that I only had because of the family that she helped build. So today I'm proud to share our grandmother with all of you. And I know how she brought you love and light and how she modeled grace and elegance and how she extended calm and warmth and how she took you in and really saw you. But she was our grandma. So I'll finish with 3 of my own claims over her. The first is that I was named after her mother, in part, Anne. The second is that when I was a baby, she would look into my eyes and tell me that she could see her mother staring back. And the third is that when she looked into my eyes and I and her mother stared back, I got to see her smiling at me with the love that only a grandchild knows.
I don't know whose idea it was for me to go last after those incredible words. It was my idea, but it was such an honor for so many years to be Charlotte's rabbi. And I know she had a lot of rabbis in her life, and so many. But I can tell Charlotte that she was an inspiration, a mentor. And as everyone said, she was able to be a congregant who was there in shul and yet a leader, and as everyone mentioned, make you special. She would listen to your Devar Torah, she would listen to your sermon, and she was a teacher. Charlotte, you introduced me to the American Jewish Congress, and I really want to say that when, as we all know, when Charlotte involved you, it was exciting, it was wonderful, there was a magic. So, Michael, you mentioned that, Charlotte would drag me to the American Jewish Congress thing and get me involved in that, and for me it felt like, wow, this is amazing, and Charlotte, you gave me the award, and everything was amazing. Hearing about as we talked about, Charlotte's hats and her collection, Charlotte, Rachel and I went to an event. It was some kind of charity event, and Charlotte I think hats were for sale, and there were all these beautiful, wonderful hats. And with Charlotte around, it was like, whoa, these look great. Rachel, you should get this one and that one. And Charlotte chose the most beautiful hat with flowers and fruits and everything. And I said, Rachel, it looks gorgeous on you, because it was under the magic of Charlotte. We took it home, and it didn't quite have that, didn't quite work, but it was everything around Charlotte became beautiful, became wonderful. And I have to say that my wife, Rachel, put it, it came out here in these beautiful words. Charlotte was a balance of being the classiest person in the world and the most down-to-earth person in the world. We've heard, welcoming everyone. I spoke to Barbara, the custodian at Anshe Shalom today, who was just devastated at this loss. And she said that every time she would walk down Melrose, Charlotte would say, "Oh, how are you, my dear? How are you?" Everyone was special around Charlotte, the embodiment of Kiddush Hashem, of sanctifying God's name, a model for what a traditional Orthodox woman. And Charlotte, you told me, you said, you grew up in a Hasidic community, the Tversky Hasidic community. You are very traditional, and yet an incredible feminist and someone who could really change the world, as we have heard. The impact of Charlotte on our shul, on Anshe Shalom, the joy that she brought on Simchat Torah, especially the women's Torah reading with her dear friends Norma and Carol and Julia, and everything. There's a phrase that's not a feminist phrase, ishto kagufo, the wife is like the husband, but in this case, Michael and Charlotte were one. Charlotte was one. The whole family was one incredible model of Kiddush Hashem. Charlotte reflected Michael, and Michael reflected Charlotte, a great candle of many wicks woven together. And no one, as we've heard, admired Charlotte's brilliant light more than Michael, believed in her causes more, and was so proud and shined with her successes. And I want to say we've heard a little about Charlotte's friends and the family, and Charlotte made you feel like they were your best friends. They were her friends, and all these names that I'm hearing in the car, and I don't want to even mention because there are so many, but after you met them at a Shabbat dinner or at an event or at a post-Thanksgiving Shabbat, you thought, I know these people really, really well because they were so dear to Charlotte. Charlotte spread this kind of pixie dust of magic around, and you were taken into this incredible world, this beautiful world, this world of love, this world where people of all types could come together. And I want to say that one of the great amazing things of our tradition is to welcome in the stranger, as we've heard, or a stranger met on some kind of line somewhere. Just about a month or two ago when I was, thank God, I called the house, and Michael answered and said, come on over. I happened to be in Lakeview, and I came over, and Charlotte was there. And Charlotte was saying, you have to stay here. Next time you come to Chicago, you must stay here. There's so many who came through Michael and Charlotte's home and were treated with a day stay, a month stay, and I even heard a year's stay in this beautiful house. And it's all part of the same picture of love, of kindness, of bringing everyone together, of chesed, of the classiest and the most modest and welcoming, and that put everyone at ease. I pray that, Charlotte, you get nachas. I don't know if it's a comfort for the family, but I've said it so many times, that you get beautiful comfort and nachas from those you've left behind. And I have confidence that Charlotte is smiling from heaven and teaching the angels how to create the fun, the beautiful world that you created here on earth that's unique to her. It's unique. It was unique to Charlotte, and yet what was unique is that you gave it to everyone around you. You made everyone feel part of it. Charlotte, your memory will always be a blessing in our world. Your gifts, your magic, your kindness will continue to bless our world and make this a better place and a beautiful place and a more kind place. And I want to end with something that's, again, I can only do it because it's traditional and because Charlotte was a traditional woman who broke all the barriers. There's a Jewish tradition of apologizing to the deceased for anything you might have done. And Rachel and I think we were still dating. We invited Michael and Charlotte for a Friday night dinner. It was a freezing night. And if you know the Michael, and so you live like Belmont and Lakeshore Drive. I had an apartment kind of in the middle on Hawthorne, and Rachel was way up on Irving Park. And it was a busy week, and my apartment was always a mess, and we said, you know what, Rachel, can you host them this summer? So I asked Charlotte, I said, Charlotte, we can either host you at my place, which is around 10 minutes away, or Rachel's place, like 25 minutes. And Charlotte said, it's fine, either one. So I said, okay, so we'll do Rachel's. And it was the coldest night. And Charlotte had one of those beautiful long coats. And Charlotte, I want to apologize to you for schlepping you out. Michael also, but Charlotte for schlepping you. But I just love you for it. And that never a word of complaint or anything. And I know that she didn't complain about it later because you said that she never said anything bad about anyone. So I asked for forgiveness, but it's in the context of just so much love and so much appreciation and so much gratitude for all the blessings that Charlotte has given all of us. May your memory continue to be a blessing for all of us. Zichrona livracha.
We're going to honor Charlotte's request for avoiding a long funeral, but only because we're honoring her request. I think there's much more that could be said, and I'm sure there's much more that will be said. In a few moments, we're going to conclude with the Kel Maleh, the memorial prayer. Just to frame it, I just want to offer three ideas, which I believe are the three ideas that Judaism teaches, three ideas that Jewish tradition teaches about these moments. The first is that through the actions of those who are living, the dead continue to impact the world. And I think that's all of the Hespedim, all of these eulogies we heard should inspire us and leave us with sadness of what we've lost, but also inspire us to continue on that really beautiful legacy. And that's true for the family, of course, and the grandchildren, and really for all of us who heard these inspiring messages that through our hands and feet, the dead continue to impact the world. The second idea that Jewish tradition teaches is that the body that houses someone we love is returned with love and care and devotion to its final resting place by those who knew and loved for the deceased. And everyone is invited who's able to help us in the cemetery to return Charlotte to her final resting place. And the third idea, which I think hovers over these moments, is the idea that somehow, in some way, there's a piece of us that continues to live even after our bodies have died, and call it the soul or the neshama or whatever it will. And it's to this idea that this final memorial prayer speaks to, and that's what it's expressing. And that, too, is an idea, I think, that animates much of what we do today. So I'd like to invite Sarah Newberger, Charlotte's niece, to recite the Kel Malay. Have it there. Her name is Yatzia Bat Chana Beliard. Thank you. Please rise.
El male rachamim shochen b'meromim hamitzeh menucha nechona al kanafei hashechina b'ma'alot kedoshim Utehorim kizohar rakia mazhirim et nishmat tzivia bat Chana ve'Eliyahu shehalacha li'olama b'gan Eden tehei menuchata Ana ba'al harachamim Yastireha b'seter kinafav li'olamim Utzror b'tzror hachayim Et nishmata Adonai hu nachalata V'tanuach b'shalom Al mishkavach V'namar Amen. O God, full of compassion, you who dwell on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of your presence among the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament to the soul of Charlotte Newberger, who has gone to eternity. Lord of mercy, bring her under the cover of your wings and let her soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be God's possession, and may her repose be peace. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at Waldheim Cemetery. It'll be off of Desplaines Avenue in Forest Park. It's Desplaines and Roosevelt Road. The Shiva information is on the service folder, as well as information about memorial contributions to the Jewish Women's Foundation of Metropolitan Chicago, or the Inheritance Project. All that information, please note the Shiva information is specific with minyan times and visitation. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession to the cemetery, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing a car in the back of the procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. And for your own personal safety, I highly recommend using your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. Please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to the cemetery. For the many people that are joining us online, the Shiva information and memorial contribution can be found on the funeral home's website. At this time, I ask those of you who've been asked to serve as pallbearers, please stand next to Charlotte's casket as everyone rises and as we escort the casket of Charlotte Newberger, along with Rabbi Wolkenfeld, Rabbi Lopatin, and the entire Newberger family from the chapel, then you may return to your cars. If it's easier for some people, you can exit through this door as well.